So we'll go ahead and get started. As students come in, I'll go ahead and make sure that I admit them throughout the session. But just to make sure you're all in the right place, today we are doing the presentation on resume. So any questions you have, feel free to ask them within our chat feature. And then we'll have pauses throughout this session to make sure that your questions are being answered, okay? Just admit a few more people. All right, so we'll jump on in. All right, so we have a brief outline for you. Today we'll give you a nice overview of our services, talk a little bit about Cougar Pathway, but spend more time on our resume tips, how to build strong bullets, and then some free resources that are available online that you can use starting today. Sorry, there's a little delay. All right, so brief overview. University Career Services, we're the hub of services across campus. But if you fall within any of these additional 6 colleges, you do have double support, so you get to double dip. So if you're a business student, hospitality student, you get double the support from a career counselor that serves as a liaison to that college. In addition to that, we also provide one-on-one appointments, and they're all virtual right now via Zoom or phone, depending on your preference. And then we're also providing a live chat drop-in feature every day, Monday through Thursday from 9 to 4. We have extended hours from 4 to 5 on Monday and Tuesday, and then Fridays from 1 to 4 as well. You'll see a little red Get Help button on our website, and you can just click on that, and there's always someone available to assist you with quick questions. Even though we're virtual, you know, based on what's going on, we still have a series of workshops that are happening every other week at noon on Wednesday and Thursday. And then we have a few career events that are coming up. So if any of you are graduating seniors and looking for opportunities, we will have a recruiting event for you all on May 20th and then also on May 27th, depending on your major and just where you fall. So look for those messages to be coming out about that as well. Okay. All right, so just in terms of some additional resources that you all have instant access to, VMOC is a smart resume platform. If you were to upload your resume today, it will give you instant feedback and bulleted level feedback on your experiences, your education, and any additional maybe activities that you've had on and off campus, and you want to describe them in a way where you're highlighting your transferable skills. The other thing, I talked about virtual chats. We have a Coog Careers workbook. So if you're not familiar with that, we have action plans in there for you all. There's some interview prep materials. There's also some information on how to negotiate your salary when you get to that point. And any questions you have regarding career, you can find in that, as well as examples on our resume and cover letter resources. And I'm gonna ask Jamie if you can pop the link to our workbook in there. In the chat, and then that way if you guys just want to browse it while I go through the session, I believe page 17 is our resume example, and so I'll be using that as a guide for our session today. The additional resources you see here, we do provide vocational assessments. The only one that is free is our Focus 2, so that's more for students that you're unsure what you want to do or what you want to major in. You just want something quick to give you some recommendations on what you should major in at the University of Houston. Maybe before scheduling those classes coming up for fall. That's an excellent resource, and you get instant feedback for those results. The other 3, the Myers-Briggs or MBTI, which is our personality assessment, is more of a psychological assessment, so that does have to be facilitated with the career counselor, as well as Strengths Quest and our strong interest inventory assessments, and those are $15 per interpretation. The last resource there, if you guys are in a crunch, or if any of you are in a crunch and you need a suit, we do have a complete career closet. We all are virtual right now, but we definitely will work something out with you if that's something that you need, considering what's going on, or if you have an interview that comes up. We are also partners with Dress for Success Houston and Career Gear. and they are still providing services. They just look a little different right now, but we can connect you to any of those services that you may need during this time if you have an interview coming up and you want to look professional, even if you have a virtual interview. Sorry, there's a little delay. Okay, there we go. Briefly, Cougar Pathways. So some of you on this session today may be trying to get your resume approved in Cougar Pathway. So a huge part of the work that we do is making sure that no employer sees anything less than a polished resume from you all. So you do have to get feedback from a career counselor, whether it's through a virtual chat or an appointment, in order to have an approved resume in the system, okay? So I'll give you some tips today to make sure that your resume can get approved. If you need additional support after our workshop that ends at 1 o'clock, feel free, I'll provide my email address. Feel free to reach out to me directly, or you can log on to our virtual chats that will start at 1 o'clock, okay? The purpose of Cougar Pathway, though, is to, in addition to scheduling your appointments, this is really the hub for all of your internships, full-time positions, and on-campus jobs, whether you're college work study or not. This is also where you can see all of our upcoming events that are taking place, whether it's our workshops or our career fairs and meet and greets. Okay. All right, so just within the chat, just take a minute, and if you have anything that you're hoping to walk away from this workshop today, go ahead and pop your questions in there. Jamie will have pieces throughout the session today to where I can come back to your questions just to make sure that you're getting your questions answered. But go ahead and take a minute and just pop any questions that you have. Maybe it's based on I'm graduating, it's my major, I want to get my resume approved to apply for internships. What's the best way to do that? And then I'll go ahead and continue from there, but take some time and you can add your questions within the chat.
One person mentioned they're interested in learning about the value of cover letters and how to write one.
Oh, awesome. So after we talk about resumes, we actually have a few slides and we'll talk about some tips for cover letter writing. Whether you have one and you want to strengthen it, or it's your first time writing one, you don't know where to start. All right.
Someone mentioned highlighting classwork in the resume when professional experience is lacking.
Great question. So I'll be talking about that too. So when we talk about experience, it's not just work experience. That could be experience that you're gaining from class projects. It could also be research experience, leadership experience. It could be study abroad. So it really depends on what your background looks like. And it doesn't have to be direct experience in your field. It could be, let's say, maybe you had a hostess position, maybe you've worked retail. Those are some really good transferable skills that you're gaining, especially if you've been there for some years, even if it's part-time, and you've trained others that have come along after you. So you don't necessarily have to have like that leadership title or supervisory title, but it's important to know these are those transferable skills that I'm gaining, whether it's leadership, communication skills that I can apply in this next setting, okay? So when we talk about resume, just some very quick tips, overarching tips is that generally speaking, it should be 1 page. Unless you're a graduate student, you have way more flexibility there. It should be more so 2 pages because you'll be highlighting maybe research experience, maybe some TA or teaching assistant experience, and things like that. But as a rule of thumb, you want to try to stick to 1 page because you want it to be succinct. You want it to really highlight your accomplishments. And the purpose is just for this to serve as your ticket for the interview. This is not everything I've ever done, but these are the highlights that I want to really share with you. And then in an interview is your time to add more of the narrative to your experiences. And so that's pretty much what this slide says. The third one down, action oriented. So you definitely want to keep it action oriented in the sense of using action verbs, focusing on what your specific role was and were there any outcomes or accomplishments, okay? And then that very last one, thinking about maybe myself and a friend we both worked at maybe as hostess or in a retail position or customer service, but we're gaining completely different skills depending on our strengths and our areas of growth. So it does take a little reflection and knowing yourself as you're writing your resume. And if you do get stuck, that's what we're here for. Come and visit the career counseling team and we can have a conversation and making sure that those strengths and those transferable skills are coming out. But when we say filled with accomplishments, it's more so from this specific position, what skills did I gain in particular? So maybe I gained presentation skills. Maybe this was something that I really wanted to work on. Maybe I'm going to be going into my first PR internship and that's going to be a requirement. I still will be able to gain that skill, but in my previous role, I got some experience from maybe training others, onboarding and things like that, okay? So just try to think a little bit outside the box. Okay, perfect. So showcasing your skills. So building on some of those tips I just shared, thinking about what are your specific skills. And when we say skills, it's not just technical. It also is some of those soft skills that employers are seeking regardless of your industry. And so we have a snapshot of some of those career readiness skills that employers are looking for, and that's based on a national association that we use in the career profession. But thinking about maybe oral communication comes naturally to me. So I'm comfortable presenting, public speaking, but I really need to enhance on my written communication skills. So thinking about what are those steps that I'm taking now as a student to do that, whether it's taking on some type of role within a student organization, or I'm really taking on, if I have a course where there's heavy writing, am I visiting the writing center? What steps am I taking and what resources am I using to really put myself on the track to strengthen these skills, okay? At the very bottom, it talks a little bit about initiative and work ethic. So thinking about a time. When was a time when someone didn't tell you to do it, you just went above and beyond on your own? And these are things as where you're developing your resume or strengthening it, revising it, you want to go back and say, hey, do I have some things in here where it shows where I thought it was thinking outside of the box, some problem solving, oral written communication, I collaborated within a team. And if you don't have those, something that is helpful to do is to pull up maybe a job description or two and say, okay, for this specific internship, what are the skills they're looking for? Do they align with what I have? Are there any gaps? And then go from there. Perfect. Okay. So building on that, we go a step further just in terms of what employers desire specifically on your resume. So if you want to take a picture of this slide, you can. We'll also make it available to you all after the session today. But just know, in addition to some of the things that we just shared, you can kind of see there's a lot of overlap from what transferable skills you should be gaining and what they would like to see on the resume, okay? And that's something that is very important because oftentimes students are really focused on academics only, having that strong GPA. But in addition to that, employers just want to see a well-rounded candidate, okay? So that's pretty much what that highlights there. We'll transition a little bit. I believe Jamie was able to share the link, right, to our resume template. And this is pretty much what this is pulling from and what I'll speak to. So when we talk about a resume, we're looking at the full picture. We're going to go section by section and talk about that a little bit further. So starting from the top, thinking about your contact information, we have some do's and don'ts here. I won't go through everyone, but just some common mistakes and challenges that we see students do have on their resume, okay? I'm going to go on down to your address. So you do not need the full address. City, state, and zip would suffice, you know, so keep that in mind, and making sure you have a professional email. Maybe first initial, last name. As long as no year or date of birth is in there, those are common things that we see. And then if you're graduating, making sure you're no longer using your UH email address, because you won't always have access to that, okay? Some things to note, just making sure your number is up to date, working, and then you have a professional voicemail as well. And if you're unsure if this is professional or not, ask a few people. Call my voicemail, give me feedback on, is this professional? Would you hire this person? Okay, you'll be surprised. At the very bottom, these are some common things that we do see as well. Since we do serve the entire campus, we see students from various backgrounds and that also come and visit or study at University of Houston from outside of the US. And so it's common to have your age, marital status, and things like that. But if you're applying for positions in the US, these are common things that you want to make sure you don't have, okay? And the reason for that is you want to make sure that you're not putting information there that can potentially lead to employer discrimination, okay? Your education section. So the takeaways from here is that, are you required to list your GPA? No, it is extremely optional. Unless you're applying for internship and it specifically states that as a minimum GPA in the requirements, that's something that we encourage you to list it. If you include your GPA, we usually say rule of thumb is 3.0 and above, but at the end of the day, it's completely up to you and what positions you're applying for. Within this section, the only thing you need to have are schools to where you're receiving a degree. So if you took a couple classes, maybe at HCC, you do not need to list that unless you received an associate's degree, okay? Oftentimes students may have honors and awards and things like that from maybe, I'll use HCC as an example, or from their high school. That can go in a separate honors, award, scholarship section, so you're still highlighting those accolades, but what employers or recruiters really want to see is when will you receive the degree, okay, or any certifications. And so with that, if you want to include your certifications in this section, you can, right underneath your degree name. So if it's University of Houston, Bachelor's of Arts, Psychology, you have your expected month and year of graduation and certifications, that's fine. Some like to include certifications within the skills and certification section. So it's really up to you and making sure that it just makes sense, you know. An example, if you're applying for, let's say you're applying for pharmacy school, and you currently work as a pharmacy tech, right? So you have a recent up-to-date certification. You may want to have that towards the top of the resume within the education, as an example, okay? Common mistakes, so make sure you don't have any high school information in your education section. And that's a rule of thumb is that if you've been at the university for a good 2 semesters, you can roll that on off. You have a GPA here, you have, you know, you're established as a University of Houston student. Were there any questions? Yes, were there any questions in the chat?
We only have one question right now, and it says, why would you use an address instead of LinkedIn in your information header section?
Yeah, good question. So in addition to what I shared in your contact information, you can also include your LinkedIn profile link, the direct link. So that's also another just rule of thumb. If your profile is up to date, right? So you'll make sure everything's up to date. In terms of contact information, you want to have more than one way that an employer can reach out to you. And then also thinking about, if from the recruiter's lens, if they're looking for someone maybe within a certain region or area, that city and state may be important for them. Will you be relocating, right? Could be something. Before they have the conversation with you. So I've seen some students, if they live on campus, but they have a permanent address, they may have both of those listed. So it really depends, you know, you can have the permanent address on there, but it's good for them to kind of see where are you in the area? And it depends on the position. Sometimes they're looking at travel, commuting, and all these other factors that do come into play as they're trying to select the best candidate. Were there any others, Jamie?
Nope, not at this time.
Okay, thanks. All right, so let's go to the next one.
Okay, then one popped up and it's a follow-up question, so I'll go ahead and ask.
Sure.
So it says, how would you go about including all that information without it getting crowded?
Yeah, so if it's within contact information, you can have your name, right? And then you can have your phone, your city, state, and zip, your phone, and your email, and then the link right underneath that. Yeah, so that's one way if you want to center it. I've had students kind of have it in kind of little columns too. So there's some things you can kind of play around with it. You just really want to maximize your space, right? So on the resume, every line is real estate, and just making sure that your format, your font size, and all of that is consistent. We'll talk more about that too. But as a rule of thumb, I would say I wouldn't go any smaller than a 10-point font, anything larger than a 12-point, unless it's your name. And then margins, the smallest I would go is probably a 0.5 all the way around, just to give yourself that space. But just those little tidbits will help you to maximize your space throughout your resume, okay? So as we transition to relevant coursework and projects, this is also another experience section that you can pull from. Projects could be in or outside of the classroom, but you do want to use that same format as you would for your experience. So you want to have the full name of the project, or if it was at the University of Houston, you can have the name of the university, name of the project or the course, and then some action bullets underneath that. So thinking about, what did I accomplish, what did I develop or create, test, assess, evaluate from this project? Did you use any tools or software as a result of that? Did you collaborate with anyone? If so, how many people? So just thinking about what your role was and what the impact was for your project. At the bottom, we have some notes just to note there. And then I'm going to go to the next section in terms of experience, because we're building on that. So experience, rule of thumb is you want to have 3 to 5 action bullets. We give you a nice little example of the formula to use. What that formula is really setting you up for are those behavioral-based interview questions. So if you are not familiar with what we call the STAR method, for those questions, you really want to have the action, verb, the task, and result. So what was kind of the situation, task, your role, not necessarily action steps, but the accomplishments associated with that. So it's just putting you on the track to think about a time from your experience where maybe I worked within a team to accomplish a goal, a time where you created something or were innovative would be an example. It could be interpersonal skills, so using that oral written communication as well. The purpose of this is making sure you're showing a balance and a good mix of your technical, which is maybe you use MATLAB, right? It could be social media skills or platforms, and balancing that with your, what we call soft skills, so interpersonal skills, okay? And that's regardless of your industry. So if any of you on the call today, on the session today are technical majors, I'm sure your resume is nice and tight and full of, all of the technical skills that you do bring to the table. But what I want to do is challenge you all to go back and say, okay, am I showing the time when I worked with the team, right? And more of the interpersonal skills. And then I'm going to say the opposite for any of you that are more of our maybe helping fields, helping majors, non-technical majors, and making sure you have infused those technical skills that you are gaining, whether you're working with children, using behavioral techniques and things like that we often forget, okay? At the very bottom, we talk about that second to the last bullet under do, quantifying your bullets and emphasizing your results and keywords. And so when we say quantify, instead of saying I've worked with children, how many, So is it I provided day-to-day support to children ranging from the ages of 2 to 5 years of age? That could be one way. You can, if you managed a classroom, you can quantify that. Was it a classroom of 25 plus children? Was it 20 to 25? And in what subject areas, okay? Those are just some very simple examples, but just making sure you have numbers wherever it's relevant, you know, within your resume. All right, so talking about just writing those action verbs, okay? We have a snippet here from our action verb sheet, which is the page right after our resume template in our Coog Careers workbook. We try to give you like a good, healthy list of different action verbs you can use so you're not being repetitive. So whether it's communication skills you're trying to articulate on your resume, you don't always have to say explained. You can say interacted, interviewed, interpreted, clarified. As an example, if it's research or technical skills, you can use investigated, organized, instilled, remodeled, repaired, and so forth. So use this list just as a guide, but what I would say, ultimately pull up 1 to 2 job descriptions that really speak to you and highlight the keywords that they're using, and you can make sure that where it makes sense, they're infused in your resume to make sure that you're speaking the language of your industry. And then here we just have some examples of before and after. The takeaway from this slide is just making sure that your action bullets don't speak like a job description. So I've seen some where it may say duties include responsible for. If you have any of those statements in your resume, put a big X through it for me, please, and jump right into an action verb, okay? A little bit from what we showed in the previous slide. And then here's some brief examples of how you can incorporate some numbers. In terms of skills, just to kind of reiterate some of the things I shared earlier, some do's and don'ts, that skills section, common challenge I see or mistake is including what we call soft skills in the skills section. So just making sure that if you have anything related to excellent team player, effective communicator in your skills section, you want to also put a big X through that. The purpose of this section is really to highlight technical skills only, okay? If you have any soft skills in this section that you feel like are very important to you, still want to highlight, go back into your experience sections, your project sections, and making sure that you're describing them in there. You're providing an example. So I'm showing you through my examples and my action bullets of a time when I worked well within a team versus telling you I'm a good team player. Some things to note is within this section, you're really just highlighting your technical skills in terms of computer, language skills, spoken languages as well. And these are some ways that you can articulate that. So maybe bilingual, fluent in, proficient in, conversational, and things like that. Okay, so just making sure you're keeping it action oriented. And then something to note, just making sure you're not upselling your languages. So if you're not bilingual, don't put that on there, okay? Just put the level that you're comfortable in, just in case you're tested on that in an interview. Honors and activities is another section. This could be scholarships and awards, just depending on what it looks like for you. What I would say for this section is if you have a scholarship or award and it's not very clear as to why you received it, just add a little one-liner there, recipient of X scholarship for maintaining a 4.0 for 2 consecutive semesters, or something like that is really helpful for the company to know. But other than that, just making sure that you have your dates on here as well. And then you can go as far back throughout your college career as you want for this section. All right, were there any questions in the chat?
We had 2 questions.
Yeah.
So one of them was, should anything from high school be listed other than maybe some awards, such as clubs that you had a position in?
That's a great question. I would say if you're like within your first year, or maybe 2 of your academic career at the University of Houston, you can go ahead and include them throughout, especially if you, let's say you were a part of maybe health-related student organizations and you're kind of going on that health track, whether it's medical, you know, dental, whatever it may be for you. that's really painting the picture for you to be involved in health-related organizations or pre-med related organizations at University of Houston, it makes sense to kind of keep that on there. But keep in mind, as you gain more experience here at the University of Houston, that stuff will start to roll off, okay? So really what they're looking for is consistent involvement, right? So not, this happened in high school, okay, what have you been doing for the past 2 or 3 years? When there's gaps, that's when it raises red flags. So I would say more than anything, just making sure that you include, I'm gonna go back a section, you include it shows that consistent involvement. One section that we didn't have on here, we talked about honors, activities, scholarships, but volunteer experience, community service, professional memberships or associations that you're involved in on or off campus can also be a section that counts as experience, okay? Especially if you have limited work experience, that's okay. Think about maybe what you're doing in the community or other associations that you're involved in. You said there was one more?
Yes, one more. And this is, does architecture department have resume review services?
Great question. So they do not have their own career center, but we actually have a career counselor on our team that is the liaison specifically to the College of Architecture and Design. Her name is Lauren Herman, and if you are a declared major, when you log into Cougar Pathway, her information automatically pops up for you. During the semester, prior to everything going virtual, she actually would have hours there in their space 1 day a week. So she comes to the students. So that's something that we have built in over the years for architecture students. And that's really the model we have across all colleges as well. We'll typically have our support and our resources in our space, but then we also will go to other spaces across campus to meet you all in between classes. All right, so let's talk a little bit about applicant tracking systems. If you haven't heard of them before, most employers use them. What it is, it's a technical tool that allows employers to screen candidates, almost like a pre-screening. So that's where those keywords really come into play, the action verbs, because you want to make sure that your resume is a reflection of the position and the industry you're applying for. Okay, so as a snapshot, let's say I'm a recruiter and I put out a position for maybe a public relations intern and I get 200 applicants, right? I keep it open for 2 weeks. As a recruiter, especially if I'm on a tight timeline, I cannot go through all 200 applicants. And so maybe I just want to see the top 25. Which is very common. So what it is a software where based on these minimum qualifications, maybe it's major, maybe it's GPA, maybe it's graduation year, your experience, I'm only gonna see the top 25 star candidates, okay? Then that allows me to look at those 25 a lot closer. And so with that said, that's why tailoring your resume is so important. And always keeping in mind that your resume is a reflection of where you are headed next, not necessarily where you are today, okay? So like my resume for student affairs, career services will look completely different from someone who's going into an engineering position, right? Based on the language I'm using and the experiences and the examples that I'm putting in my resume, okay? And if you're unsure, like I don't know how to tailor it, you know, I would pull up at a minimum 2 position descriptions. It could be Cougar Pathway, it could be Indeed, just as an example, and see, okay, where are the overlaps? What are those common things that they're looking for? And are they in my resume and I haven't talked about them, or do I need to gain that experience? And then if you're unsure, meet with us and we'll actually sit down with you. You can send us a link and then we'll match it up for you. All right, so this is just a kind of behind the scenes, a snapshot of what an applicant tracking system can look like. The takeaway here is that you can see there's some stars in there, and that's kind of how candidates are rated, okay? Based on those ratings, I may say, okay, I only want to see the ones that have 3s and above, as an example, okay? Based on the minimum qualifications. All right, so I'm going to transition to cover letters. I know someone had questions about cover letters earlier in this session. If you don't have one, just know we do have that resource in our workbook that outlines step-by-step how to start and create and develop your cover letter. The takeaway from the cover letter is that it's not a narrative. It's not a personal statement, you know, of everything I've done from when I started working to date over the past 5, 7 or plus years. What it is based on this position, if they're looking for me to have, let's say, good oral communication skills, so public speaking, right? These are maybe 2, maybe 3 examples of a time where I gained that skill, and then how I did that. Okay, so an example could be, you can see we have a few examples here that's on the screen. I'm not going to go through each and every one, but know that this is available to you. What I would advise you all to do, especially if you have limited experience, is to pull from one example from your academic coursework, so from your classes. Thinking about a time maybe when I worked with a team to develop a presentation. What was the topic? What was your role? What skills did you develop as a result of that experience, okay? Now I'll give you some, a fleshed out example. Then I would have an example from maybe work experience. And if you don't have work experience, I would pull from volunteer experience, student organization experience, or community service, okay? Those are 2 good places to have examples. So you're showing the balance of, from my academics, I learned this, and maybe it's not one class or one project. Maybe I took these 3 classes related to public relations. I developed these 3 skills, and for example, okay? And then in addition to that, maybe from my, maybe it's from my previous internship, especially if you're applying for a full-time position, okay? And so even you can see there's an example in, let's see, paragraph, there's a few here, but paragraph 3. Within this example, the student was pulling from their tutoring experiences. They tied it to the company's mission and how their experience customizing tutoring services allowed them to better support their populations or the people that they were working with, okay? And then they align that with how I'll be able to contribute this skill set to your company, okay? And that's a great example because it doesn't have to be in the same field that you're in. That's where it goes back to looking at what are my transferable skills that I gained in a maybe completely different position or industry that make me a strong fit for this internship. Were there any questions, Jimmy? Yeah.
There is a student that said that they were switching from their laptop to their phone. So just keep an eye out for the waiting room. And then we had, it seems like 2 questions. One of them is they were asking about what support does the pharmacy school specifically have, or the liaison in our office? And I did include the link in the chat just so they could see who the career counselors are in the different ones. Okay. But yeah, I'll pause there.
Yeah, so it sounds like if you're preparing to apply to pharmacy school, depending on your major, you will work with a career counselor, and we help you with everything from personal statement writing to interview prep. So whatever you need to apply to get you on the track to apply to pharmacy school and to get ready for their interview process as well. So you can just reach out to us and let us know whether you have an interview or down the line, or you're getting ready to prepare your materials. So it kind of depends on where you are in the process.
And then our second question is, do they also have a tracking system for cover letters, or is that system just focused on resumes?
From my understanding, if the employer requires, whatever documents they require, they all get scanned through the applicant tracking system. So even University of Houston, we have that when we're recruiting for positions. And if for our positions, we require cover letter, resume, all documents go through the tracking system. Okay, and that brings me to a point. So in terms of cover letter, even if they don't require it, you should always have a draft ready to go, okay? Because what I would hate to happen is that you're applying for positions and then there's one that requires a cover letter and then it slows down your process because you have to develop one. And you don't want it to be rushed, you want it to be strong, and you really want it to be a reflection of your skills, and you want it to be thoughtful. So my task and homework for you all today is after the session, sometime in the next week or two, start drafting your cover letter and start reaching out to us, even if you have a couple bullets and you need us to kind of, help you go to that next step. You always want to have one just handy because it takes a lot of time to tailor it to the company and the employer, okay? So that brings me to my next piece. I talked a little bit about like the content and flow and kind of what examples that you can pull from. At the very top though, just making sure that instead of addressing it to whom it may concern, you can address it to Dear Hiring Manager, Dear Human Resources Committee, Dear Hiring Committee. So it just depends on if you don't have a name, right? And you can always reach out and say, I'm preparing my materials for this position. Is there someone I should address my materials to? And if they say, oh, you can address them to human resources, then that's what you do, okay? But just try to avoid the to whom it may concern. It's a little too generic. And the purpose of the cover letter is to really tailor it to the company and to show that you've done some homework. Especially if you're thinking about why am I applying to, let's say, Memorial Hermann versus Houston Methodist, right? Just as an example, they really want to see that you've done some homework about their mission or their vision, and then how I'm applying for this internship or job aligns to the work that they're doing. All right. Sorry, there's a little delay. Are there any questions in the chat while we're waiting for the slides?
There are no new ones, but just a
Okay.
reminder, y'all can add them to the chat.
Yes. All right, so let's go to the next one. All right. So just some points to reiterate for your cover letter. Tailoring, I can't stress that enough. Tailor each and every cover letter to the positions you're applying for. It can be a lot of work. It does take a lot of time, but applying for positions, especially jobs and full-time opportunities, is like a part-time job. So you definitely need to set aside time, a few hours each week, if that's something, aside from your academics, making sure you're settled in that space, especially with what's going on, but setting aside, even if it's just a few hours each week or on the weekend, to either prepare materials and apply. Some things to reiterate, it's just not in that third bullet, I would say a regurgitation of your resume. So I would say pull maybe 2-3 experiences max from your resume and then provide examples about it, okay? Accomplishment-oriented examples, okay? And then that very last one, just going back to what are the key components or responsibilities of the position. So if they're really looking for me to develop some type of marketing campaign, right? Have I really highlighted those skills and made it clear about the experiences I've had previously and how it aligns with what the position requires, okay? The other thing is thinking about the company. So if the company's mission is to, I don't know, serve the community, right? Have you highlighted those experiences and how that's important to you and that motivated you to apply as well, okay? So think about all those elements. Okay. And so that concludes the presentation for the most part. These are some additional resources that you can use. I did talk a little bit about VMOC at the beginning, but just know this is a platform that's available to you on our website, right under the students section. Or you can go here, vmoc.com/UH. Make sure you put the /UH there. That makes it free for you all. And then what it is, it's a free platform. You upload your resume within about 15 seconds. You get instant feedback on each portion of your resume, and it gives you examples. The other cool part is that it's based on good and bad resumes we've submitted over the years by major and by industry. Okay, so it'd be benchmarked based on your peers at the University of Houston. Workbook, I've kind of mentioned this a few times throughout this session today, but this is an excellent tool. Let's say it's after hours, you want examples of a cover letter, a resume. You want to do some action planning. Maybe you want to prepare for your first internship interview. Everything you need to know is in this book, and we made it available to you online. These are also the same worksheets that a career counselor will use with you in one-on-one appointments. And these are the same resources we use in workshops and orientations too, okay? So go ahead and take advantage of it. And then if you have questions, once you meet with your career counselor, you can always pick up where you left off. In terms of the live chat, just note our hours are there for you all. And you can really ask us any career-related question. We're here. It's a full team of us, including myself. We're there all throughout the week, answering any questions you have. We also do live resume reviews during these sessions as well. So if you have a resume that was not approved in Cougar Pathway, you want it to be approved on the spot, or you want instant feedback, we can look at it, pull it up and say, okay, do these 2-3 things, upload it, and then we'll approve it directly. Okay, so it just streamlines the process for you. All right, spring 2020, this was a snapshot of our lineup for the semester. But as I mentioned, under our events section, we actually have updated all of our events for this semester that are now virtual. So our liberal arts career fair has been adjusted. It's happening later in May. The information is up to date and on our website, and it will be virtual, and more information will be shared with you all. Just make sure that if you are interested in attending any of our virtual events or career fairs or workshops, to RSVP, because that's the only way that you'll be able to get access to the Zoom link or the login details, okay? And our contact information's here. We are available in all of these different modes. And then making sure that if you do not follow social media, please do. We provide a lot of updates, whether it's on our career fairs, our workshops, our services, and we provide a lot of job opportunities as well, okay? And that's all I have for you all today. What questions did you have, any of you have?
I'll ask one from the chat, and then and then also y'all are more than welcome to unmute yourself at this point and ask other questions. So somebody had a question about, is VMOC free for alumni as well, or just current UH students?
Great question. So VMOC is actually a platform just for current UH students. It's not for alumni. So if you are an alum, and when I say alum, that's anyone outside of this 6-month grace period. So if you graduated in December, you have until December 2019, you have until June 1st to use the platform. Then from there, you work directly with our alumni career counseling team.
Somebody asked a question about how do you use VMOC?
Great question. So on our website, we actually have some step-by-step guides for you. So under students and then the Get Resume section. Jamie, if you can pop that link in there for them, scroll right to the bottom. It tells you how to create an account. And then once you do that, literally all you do is upload your resume and it gives you feedback. There's nothing else that you have to do. It's very straightforward. And then let's say you get some feedback and you want to improve it. You have up to 7 free uploads that you can do in the system. So you can make the changes, upload again, and increase your score. It does put you in zones. So we have like a green zone, yellow zone, and a red zone. And it gives you feedback based on that. So are your action verbs strong? Are you using accomplishment-oriented language? And then it gives you even more specific feedback based on your major and industry. Okay, were there any others?
There are no more in the group chat as of right now. And if I missed anybody's, feel free to either re-enter it into the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask.
Okay, so then what I'll do for those that attended the session today, will send out my email addressed directly to you. So if you have any questions, follow-up questions, or you want me to look at your resume, you can send that to me. And then we can go from there. Okay. All right. So that concludes our session for today. All right. Thank you, everyone.